In today's video, we journey back in time to uncover the secrets of the past. Welcome, to a story written in the sands of history. The story of ancient Greece and its mythology. Long before skyscrapers towered over cities and machines connected the world in seconds, there was a land where time flowed differently, where mountains spoke in thunder, seas roared with divine fury, and every grove and cave held the whisper of a god. This was ancient Greece, a realm where history and myth danced together, indistinguishable in the minds of its people. For the Greeks, the story of their past was not merely a record of kings and wars, but a living tapestry woven with the threads of gods, heroes, monsters, and eternal truths. Ancient Greece didn't begin as one unified nation. It was born from a mosaic of independent city-states, Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, each with its own identity, government, and gods of special reverence. But long before the golden age of democracy or the glory of the Olympic Games, Greece was the land of two great pre-classical civilizations, the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. The Minoans, the first civilization of Europe. Before the rise of Athens or the triumph of Sparta, long before Homer sang of the Trojan War, there was a sophisticated civilization flourishing on the sun-drenched island of Crete in the Aegean Sea. These people, whom we now call the Minoans, built the first advanced society in Europe. Their cities were grand, their art vibrant, and their influence far-reaching. Yet despite their achievements, they vanished mysteriously, leaving behind only ruins and myths. The Minoans were an ancient civilization that thrived on the island of Crete from around 3000 BCE to 1450 BCE. The term Minoan was coined by the British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans in the early 20th century, who named them after King Minos, a legendary ruler from Greek mythology associated with the Labyrinth and the Minotaur. While the Minoans had no known written literature or historical chronicles, their legacy survives through archaeological remains, especially at sites like Knossos, Phaistos, Malea, and Zakros. At the heart of Minoan culture stood the Palace of Knossos, a sprawling multi-story complex covering over 150,000 square feet. Unlike later Greek palaces, Knossos lacked massive defensive walls, suggesting a relatively peaceful society or a strong naval defense, a concept sometimes referred to as a thalassocracy, or sea-based power. Knossos featured grand staircases and open courtyards, indoor plumbing and elaborate drainage systems, colorful frescoes depicting nature, rituals, and daily life, complex storage rooms filled with pit hoi, large clay jars, used for storing olive oil, grain, and wine. The structure's labyrinthine layout likely inspired the Greek myth of the Labyrinth, said to house the monstrous Minotaur, which was built by the craftsman Daedalus for King Minos. Minoan religion centered on nature worship and fertility. They revered female deities, particularly the mother goddess or snake goddess, often depicted holding serpents in each hand, symbolizing power over life and death. Religious practices included mountain peak sanctuaries and cave shrines, bull-leaping rituals, where acrobats vaulted over bulls, a symbol of strength, renewal, and possibly a religious offering. Processions and sacrifices depicted in frescoes and ceramics. These themes deeply influenced later Greek mythology, especially the myths of Zeus's birth in a Cretan cave, the Minotaur, and the legend of Europa, whom Zeus abducted from Phoenicia and brought to Crete. The Minoans were masterful artists. Their frescoes are among the most expressive in the ancient world, showing scenes of nature, sports, festivals, and marine life. Key elements of Minoan art. Use of vivid colors, blues, reds, and yellows. Naturalistic themes, including dolphins, birds, flowers, and sea creatures. Figures depicted in motion, showing grace and fluidity. A notable absence of war scenes, unlike later Mycenaean or Greek art. Their pottery evolved from simple designs to elegant kamars wherein later to the marine style, decorated with octopuses and waves. Minoan artisans also worked with gold, ivory, and bronze, creating jewelry, weapons, and ceremonial artifacts of exquisite craftsmanship. Minoan Crete was strategically located at the crossroads of the Mediterranean, making it a hub of international trade. They traded extensively with Egypt, as seen in art and artifacts, the Levant and Anatolia, other Aegean islands and mainland Greece. Exports included olive oil and wine, pottery and textiles, metal tools and luxury goods. Their wealth from trade allowed them to flourish, build elaborate palaces, and sustain a rich artistic culture. The Minoans developed two major scripts. Cretan hieroglyphs, circa 2100 to 1700 BCE, still undeciphered. Lineare, circa 1800 to 1450 BCE, a syllabic script used primarily for administrative and religious records. Lineare remains undeciphered, and while it may represent an early form of pre-Greek language, scholars still debate its origins. It was later adapted by the Mycenaeans into Linear B, which has been deciphered and records an early form of Greek. Around 1450 BCE, most Minoan palaces, except Knossos, were destroyed. The cause is debated. A massive volcanic eruption on Thera, modern-day Santorini, around 1600 BCE may have triggered tsunamis and climate shifts, weakening Minoan society. Increasing dominance by the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, who may have invaded or taken control. By around 1400 BCE, Knossos itself fell, and Minoan influence faded. The Mycenaeans adopted many aspects of Minoan culture, including writing, linear B, art styles, and religious symbols. The Minoans left no epic poems or monuments to kings. Their story comes from what remains: frescoes, pottery, ruins, and fragments of writing. They are remembered not for conquest, but for culture, beauty, and innovation. Their legacy includes the concept of the Labyrinth and the Minotaur. Influence on Greek religious practices, especially the worship of goddesses and sacred bulls. Early advancements in architecture, plumbing, and art. Though they vanished thousands of years ago, the Minoans continue to captivate historians, archaeologists, and artists alike. The Minoans were Europe's first great civilization, a people who built without walls, painted without fear, and lived with a sense of harmony between humanity and the natural world. Their history is a blend of fact and myth, art and mystery, brilliance and silence. In the words of Sir Arthur Evans, who uncovered their palaces, they taught the ancient world how to live beautifully. And indeed, through their ruins and legends, they still whisper that lesson to us today. The Mycenaeans were the first Greeks, warrior kings, master builders, and epic storytellers. Thriving between 1600 BCE and 1100 BCE, they built powerful cities, sailed across the Mediterranean, and inspired some of the greatest legends of Western civilization, including the Trojan War, King Agamemnon, and Odysseus. Their civilization marked the peak of the Late Bronze Age in mainland Greece and laid the cultural foundations for classical Greece. The term Mycenaean comes from the ancient city of Mycenae in the northeastern Peloponnese. Mycenae was once a thriving fortress palace ruled by powerful kings. The Mycenaeans were Greek-speaking Indo-Europeans who gradually absorbed and expanded upon the earlier Minoan civilization of Crete. The Mycenaeans were warlike and hierarchical, skilled engineers and traders, the dominant power in the Aegean from c. 1600 to 1100 BCE. The Mycenaean world was made up of palatial city-states, each ruled by a wanax, king. These cities included Mycenae, Pylos, Tiryns, Thebes, Athens, Sparta. These cities were fortified with massive cyclopean walls, so named because later Greeks believed that only cyclopes, giants, could have built such colossal structures. The palaces were centers of political, economic, and religious power. At Mycenae, the most famous features are the Lion Gate, the main entrance adorned with a sculpture of two lions. The grave circles, containing royal tombs filled with gold and weapons. The treasury of Atrus, a beehive-shaped tholos tomb with an enormous stone dome. Unlike the peaceful Minoans, the Mycenaeans were militaristic. Their society was organized around war and conquest. Kings were warriors, and success in battle brought wealth and prestige. Evidence of their martial culture includes fortified cities on high ground. Richly decorated weapons and armor found in graves. Depictions of warfare and hunting in art. References in Homer's epics to heroic battles and sieges. The Mycenaeans likely conquered Crete around 1450 BCE, taking control of Minoan palaces and adapting their culture and writing system, Linear A into Linear B. The Mycenaeans used Linear B, the earliest known form of the Greek language. This script was mainly used for administrative records, not literature. It was written on clay tablets, which have survived thanks to fires that baked the clay. Linear B tablets show us how palaces were organized. Lists of goods, animals, workers, and religious offerings. The existence of bureaucratic control over economy and religion. Famous decipherers Michael Ventris and John Chadwick unlocked Linear B in the 1950s, proving that the Mycenaeans were Greek speakers. Mycenaean religion was polytheistic and shared many features with later Greek mythology. They worshipped deities like Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, Athena, Hermes, Ares. Many of these gods appeared in Linear B tablets, indicating their early worship. Religious practices included offerings of wine, oil, and animals. Shrines and altars within palace compounds. Possibly human sacrifice, debated among scholars. Art and culture blended Minoan elegance with Mycenaean intensity, frescoes, jewelry, pottery, and weapons combined beauty with symbolism of power and dominance. The Mycenaeans had a complex economy based on agriculture, craft production, and trade. Palaces acted as redistribution centers. They collected goods and labor from surrounding communities and redistributed them as needed. They traded with Egypt and the Levant, Anatolia, Italy and Sicily, Cyprus and the Aegean Islands. Exports included olive oil, pottery, perfumes, bronze tools and weapons. Imports included gold and silver, ivory and glass, exotic spices and luxury goods. The Mycenaeans are the likely inspiration behind the Greek heroic age, depicted in Homer's epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. While the accuracy of the Trojan War is debated, archaeological evidence at Hizarlik, ancient Troy, suggests that a conflict may have occurred around c. 1200 BCE. Key Mycenaean heroes include Agamemnon, king of Mycenae and leader of the Greek forces. Menelaus, king of Sparta, husband of Helen. Achilles, Odysseus, and Ajax, heroes with semi-divine status. The blend of real Mycenaean names, places, and customs with myth makes Homer a literary mirror of a long-lost age. Around 1200 BCE, Mycenaean civilization collapsed mysteriously. The causes may include invasion by the Dorians or Sea Peoples, internal rebellion or civil war, earthquakes and natural disasters, economic collapse or disruption of trade, climate change and famine. Palaces were destroyed and abandoned. Linear B writing disappeared. Greece entered a dark age that lasted about 400 years, little writing, fewer settlements, and lost technological skills. However, the legacy of the Mycenaeans lived on through oral traditions and myth, eventually forming the backbone of classical Greek culture. Though their empire faded, the Mycenaeans left behind a profound legacy. The Greek language they spoke evolved into Classical Greek. Their architecture, burial practices, and art influenced future generations. Their gods and myths became central to Greek religion and literature. They inspired some of the greatest epics in Western literature. They were the bridge between prehistory and history, the precursors of Greek city-states, and the heroes of myth. The Mycenaeans were more than warriors, they were builders, sailors, scribes, and kings. Their world was one of gold and blood, palaces and tombs, gods and heroes. Though their civilization crumbled, their memory endures in legends and ruins, in Homer's songs and in the stones of Mycenae. When you stand beneath the Lion Gate or read the Iliad, you are walking in the shadow of the Mycenaeans, the first Greeks, whose stories still echo across time. When the Mycenaean world collapsed around 1100 BCE, Greece entered a dark age, but myths flourished, passed by bards, eventually giving rise to Homer's epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. The ancient Greeks didn't just believe in gods, they lived with them. They believed the cosmos was born from chaos, and from this primordial soup came the Titans, ruled by Cronus, the god of time. But Cronus, fearing a prophecy that his children would overthrow him, devoured each newborn. Only one escaped, Zeus, hidden by his mother, Rhea. Zeus grew powerful, overthrew Cronus, and freed his siblings, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia. The Titanomachy, the great war between gods and titans, raged for 10 years before Zeus and his allies claimed victory, establishing their reign from the heights of Mount Olympus. Each god represented more than a natural force, they embodied human nature. Just as the gods ruled the skies, the heroes ruled the land. Humans of divine blood and great destiny, often caught between honor and hubris. Heracles, Hercules son of Zeus, famed for his 12 labors, including slaying the Nemean lion, capturing the Erymanthian boar, and retrieving Cerberus from the underworld. Perseus, slayer of Medusa, rescuer of Andromeda, and founder of Mycenae. Theseus, killer of the Minotaur, and king of Athens, who symbolized order triumphing over chaos. Jason and the Argonauts, sought the golden fleece, braving harpies, sirens, and the wrath of gods. Achilles, hero of the Trojan War, invincible except for his heel. His rage and death form the heart of the Iliad. Odysseus, the clever king of Ithaca, whose 10-year journey home was a battle against fate, monsters, and temptation. The heroic age is where myth and morality blurred. The heroes were not saints, they were flawed, tragic, ambitious. And yet, they became immortal in story, their deeds echoing in art, drama, and poetry. By the 5th century BCE, Athens had become the cultural heart of Greece. It gave the world democracy, philosophy, theater, and a new way of thinking, logos, or reason. This age saw the rise of Socrates, c. 470 to 399 BCE, is one of the most famous and influential figures in the history of philosophy. A thinker who wrote nothing himself, he is known through the writings of his students, especially Plato. Socrates revolutionized philosophy in ancient Athens by shifting its focus from the physical world to ethics and the examination of human behavior. He introduced a method of questioning that remains central to philosophical inquiry even today. Socrates did not claim to have wisdom, but instead, he sought to uncover truth by asking questions, challenging assumptions, and exposing contradictions. For this, he gained many followers, and many enemies. Socrates was born around 470 BCE in Athens, Greece. His father, Sophroniscus, was a stonemason or sculptor, and his mother, Phaenarete, was a midwife. Socrates may have learned his father's trade, but he chose a different kind of craftsmanship, shaping minds. Despite being a native Athenian, Socrates lived a modest life. He was known for his ugly appearance, bald, snub-nosed, and barefoot, but also for his sharp intellect and magnetic presence in public places such as the agora, the marketplace. He served as a hoplite, foot soldier, in the Peloponnesian War and was noted for his courage and endurance. Socrates famously said, "I know that I know nothing. He believed that recognizing one's ignorance was the first step to acquiring true knowledge. He often challenged people who claimed to be wise, such as politicians, poets, and artisans, and revealed that their understanding was superficial or self-deceiving. Another of Socrates' most famous quotes: "The unexamined life is not worth living." Socrates argued that people must examine their beliefs, values, and actions to live a meaningful and virtuous life. He believed the goal of life was not wealth or power, but moral integrity and wisdom. Socrates believed that virtue is knowledge. If someone truly understands what is good, they will naturally do good. Thus, immoral behavior results from ignorance, not evil intent. He focused on questions like: what is justice? What is courage? What is piety? What is the good life? For Socrates, these questions were central to living rightly. Socrates did not lecture or teach in the traditional sense. Instead, he used a method of dialectical questioning, now known as the Socratic method. The method involves asking a question, receiving a proposed answer, challenging that answer with further questions, exposing contradictions or weaknesses, arriving at a clearer, deeper understanding. This approach encourages critical thinking, self-awareness, and humility. Example: Socrates might ask, "What is justice?" When someone gives an answer, he examines it with more questions, leading the person to refine or abandon their initial claim. Socrates had many followers, the most famous being Plato, who recorded Socratic dialogues and founded the Academy. Xenophon, a soldier and historian who also wrote about Socrates. Antisthenes, founder of the Cynic school. Alcibiades and Critias, influential Athenians with controversial roles in politics. Socrates influenced Plato, who in turn taught Aristotle, creating a chain of philosophical legacy that shaped Western thought for millennia. In 399 BCE, Socrates was brought to trial on the following charges: corrupting the youth of Athens, impiety, not believing in the gods of the state. The trial took place in a turbulent political climate. Athens had recently suffered defeat in the Peloponnesian War and was distrustful of dissenters. Socrates' association with unpopular figures like Alcibiades and Critias didn't help his case. Socrates defended himself with dignity and refused to beg for mercy. According to Plato's Apology, he told the jury, "I would rather die having spoken after my manner than speak in your manner and live." He was found guilty by a narrow margin and sentenced to death by drinking hemlock, a poisonous plant. Socrates died calmly and bravely, surrounded by his friends. His death shocked many and inspired generations of thinkers. For Plato and others, it symbolized the conflict between the individual and the state, between truth and popular opinion. Socrates' death also marked the beginning of his immortal influence. Though he wrote nothing himself, his teachings survived through Plato's dialogues, Apology, Crito, Phaedo, Symposium, Republic. Xenophon's Memoirs of Socrates. Mentions by Aristophanes, a playwright who mocked him in the clouds. Socrates' influence reaches far beyond his time. He is seen as the father of Western ethics and moral philosophy, a model for intellectual honesty and civic courage, the founder of philosophical inquiry. His method is still used in modern education, especially in law, medicine, and liberal arts. In a world full of certainty and division, Socrates reminds us that doubt, questioning, and humility are signs of wisdom. Socrates lived simply, questioned deeply, and died nobly. He left no writings, no disciples in the formal sense, and no worldly wealth. Yet his legacy endures more powerfully than kings and empires. He challenged Athens, and the world, to think differently. In doing so, he gave birth to philosophy as we know it. As Plato wrote in Phaedo, "Of all the men of his time whom we have known, he was the wisest, the justest, and the best. Plato, c. 427 to 347 BCE, was an ancient Greek philosopher, student of Socrates, teacher of Aristotle, and the founder of the Academy in Athens, the first institution of higher learning in the Western world. Through his dialogues, he laid the foundations for Western philosophy, science, political theory, ethics, metaphysics, and epistemology. Plato's works have shaped thought for over 2 millennia. He wrote about justice, reality, knowledge, love, and the soul, and he used his mentor Socrates as the central character in most of his writings. Plato was born around 427 BCE in Athens, into an aristocratic and politically connected family. His birth name was likely Aristocles, but he became known as Plato, possibly meaning broad in Greek, referring to his broad physique or broad style of writing. His family background exposed him to politics early in life, but his encounters with Socrates redirected his focus toward philosophy and the pursuit of truth and wisdom. Plato became a devoted student of Socrates, who deeply shaped his outlook. The shocking execution of Socrates in 399 BCE profoundly affected Plato and caused him to turn away from politics and focus on philosophical inquiry. In his writings, Plato uses Socrates as the main speaker, presenting philosophical ideas through dialogue, exploration, and questioning. His dialogues preserve much of what we know about Socrates and helped immortalize his mentor's method and legacy. Around 387 BCE, Plato founded the Academy in Athens, often regarded as the first university in the Western world. It served as a center for philosophy, science, and mathematics for nearly 1,000 years, until it was closed by the Roman Emperor Justinian in 529 CE. The Academy welcomed thinkers from across the Greek world. Among its most famous students was Aristotle, who studied there for 20 years. Plato's ideas are wide-ranging and foundational. His philosophical system is often described as idealism, emphasizing eternal truths and abstract forms over the material world. Theory of forms. Plato believed that beyond the physical world lies a realm of perfect, unchanging ideas or forms. Everything we see is merely an imperfect reflection of these forms. For example, a physical tree is a shadow of the form of treeness. Justice in society reflects the form of justice. This dual world view divides the visible world, temporary and changeable. The intelligible world, eternal and true. The allegory of the cave. In his work The Republic, Plato presents the allegory of the cave, illustrating the journey from ignorance to enlightenment. In the allegory, prisoners live chained in a cave, seeing only shadows on a wall. One escapes and sees the real world illuminated by the sun, symbol of truth. He returns to free the others, but they reject him. This allegory represents the philosopher's journey to truth, the resistance of society to truth, the difference between appearance and reality. Plato proposed that the soul has 3 parts. Rational, seeks truth and wisdom. Spirited, seeks honor and courage. Appetitive, desires food, pleasure, and wealth. A just person is one whose soul is balanced, with reason ruling over spirit and appetite. Political philosophy, the Republic. In the Republic, Plato describes his vision of an ideal society ruled by philosopher kings, individuals who love wisdom and are best suited to govern. He categorizes society into 3 classes. Rulers, wisdom, the philosopher kings. Guardians, courage, the warriors. Producers, desire, farmers, artisans, and merchants. Justice in the state mirrors justice in the soul, each part performing its proper role. Plato wrote around 35 dialogues, often in the form of conversations featuring Socrates. Key works include Apology, Socrates' defense speech at his trial. Crito, Socrates' discussion of justice and law. Phaedo, the immortality of the soul and Socrates' death. Republic, Justice, politics, the ideal state, forms, and the cave. Symposium, the nature of love and beauty. Timaeus, cosmology and the structure of the universe. Phaedrus, love, rhetoric, and the soul. Laws, Plato's later and more practical work on law and governance. Plato's views on reality and knowledge are central to Western thought. Knowledge, episteme, is eternal and comes through reason. Opinion, doxa, is based on sensory experience and is unreliable. True knowledge is recollection of the forms, which the soul knew before birth, a doctrine called anamnesis. He emphasized reason as the path to truth, laying the foundation for rationalism in philosophy. In Symposium and Phaedrus, Plato explores eros, love, as a divine force that leads the soul toward truth and beauty. True love is not physical but intellectual and spiritual. Love begins with attraction to individual beauty and rises to appreciation of the form of beauty itself. This ladder of love elevates the soul from the physical to the divine. Plato continued writing and teaching until his death around 347 BCE at the age of 80. He likely died in Athens and was buried near the Academy. Though some of his later works, like Laws, show a more practical tone, he remained dedicated to philosophical ideals. Plato's influence on philosophy, science, politics, and religion is vast and enduring. Aristotle, his student, further developed and challenged his ideas. Christian theology was deeply shaped by Platonic concepts, e.g., Augustine. Neoplatonism, a later philosophical movement, inspired thinkers for centuries. His dialogues remain required reading in philosophy, literature, and political theory. Plato shaped questions such as: what is truth? What is justice? What is the best form of government? How should we live? His work is not just academic, it challenges the human soul to rise beyond illusion and strive for the highest ideals. Plato was more than a philosopher, he was a visionary who dared to imagine a world governed by truth, reason, and justice. Through his dialogues, he created a timeless conversation, one that still continues today in universities, courts, and hearts around the world. He gave the Western world its first philosophical system, and through the Academy and his student Aristotle, he became the intellectual grandfather of Western civilization. As Alfred North Whitehead once said, "The safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato." Aristotle, 384 to 322 BCE, was an ancient Greek philosopher and polymath, student of Plato, and tutor to Alexander the Great. He is regarded as one of the most significant intellectual figures in Western history. His contributions spanned philosophy, logic, ethics, politics, biology, physics, rhetoric, psychology, and metaphysics. Unlike his teacher Plato, who emphasized ideal forms, Aristotle focused on empirical observation and practical knowledge. He laid the groundwork for the scientific method and influenced intellectual thought for over 2,000 years. Aristotle was born in 384 BCE in Stagira, a town in northern Greece, Macedonia. His father, Nicomachus, was the personal physician to King Amyntas of Macedon, which gave Aristotle early access to scientific and medical knowledge. At the age of 17, Aristotle went to Athens to study at Plato's Academy, where he remained for 20 years, until Plato's death in 347 BCE. Although he greatly admired his teacher, Aristotle eventually developed philosophical ideas that differed significantly from Plato's. After Plato's death, Aristotle traveled and tutored various rulers, including Alexander the Great, the future world conqueror. In 335 BCE, he returned to Athens and established his own school, the Lyceum, where he taught for over a decade. At the Lyceum, Aristotle promoted systematic research, empirical observation, and categorization of knowledge. Students at the Lyceum often walked during lectures, which led to Aristotle's followers being called peripatetics, from the Greek word for walking. Aristotle was a true polymath, his work influenced nearly every domain of thought. Here are some of his most important contributions. A. Logic. Aristotle is considered the founder of formal logic. His system of syllogistic logic laid the foundation for deductive reasoning. Example. All humans are mortal. Socrates is a human. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. His logical system remained dominant in the West until the 19th century. B. Metaphysics. In his book Metaphysics, Aristotle explores the nature of reality, existence, and being. Key concepts. Substance, the underlying reality of things. Form and matter, everything is made of matter and given shape by form. Potentiality and actuality, a seed has the potential to become a tree, the tree is its actuality. The unmoved mover, a divine being or first cause that initiates motion without being moved itself. C. Ethics. Aristotle's ethical theory is known as virtue ethics. His key work, Nicomachean Ethics, emphasizes the development of good character through habit and reason. Core ideas. Eudaimonia, flourishing or well-being, is the highest human good. Achieving eudaimonia requires living a life of virtue in accordance with reason. Virtue lies in the golden mean, a balance between extremes. Example, courage is the mean between cowardice and recklessness. D. Politics. In politics, Aristotle discusses the role of the state and the nature of citizenship, justice, and governance. Humans are political animals by nature. The best government promotes the common good. He analyzed various constitutions and preferred a constitutional government that balances monarchy, aristocracy, and democracy. E. Natural sciences and biology. Aristotle was one of the first empirical biologists, observing over 500 animal species. He dissected animals and categorized them based on anatomy and function. His biological works include History of Animals, Parts of Animals, Generation of Animals. He introduced classifications like vertebrates/invertebrates, and his observations remained authoritative until the modern scientific revolution. F. Physics and Cosmology. In physics, Aristotle described the universe as a series of natural causes. He believed in a geocentric, earth-centered, universe, composed of 5 elements: earth, water, air, fire, and ether, a heavenly substance. He also introduced the concept of natural motion and violent motion. The idea that everything has a purpose, teleology. Though later disproven, his physics influenced science until the time of Newton and Galileo. G. Rhetoric and Poetics. In rhetoric, Aristotle examined the art of persuasion using ethos, credibility; pathos, emotion; logos, logic. In poetics, he analyzed tragedy and literary forms, introducing terms like catharsis, emotional purification through drama; hamartia, a tragic flaw in a hero. These works became central to literary and rhetorical theory. Aristotle wrote extensively, but many of his works were lecture notes and treatises, not polished for publication. About 30 of his texts survive today, covering a wide range of topics. Major works include Nicomachean Ethics, Politics, Metaphysics, Poetics, Rhetoric, Physics, On the Soul, De Anima, History of Animals. His writing style is methodical, technical, and precise, sometimes difficult to read but immensely deep. Though Aristotle was Plato's student, he rejected Plato's theory of forms, which held that perfect, abstract realities exist beyond the material world. Aristotle believed forms exist within things, not in a separate realm. We can understand reality by studying the physical world and using reason and observation. Their differing views represent a foundational split in philosophy, Idealism, Plato, versus Empiricism, Aristotle. In 343 BCE, Aristotle was invited by King Philip II of Macedon to tutor his son, Alexander. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander developed an appreciation for Greek culture, science, and reason, though he later diverged from Aristotle's philosophies in practice. Aristotle's influence on Alexander helped spread Hellenistic culture across Asia and the Mediterranean. After Alexander's conquests, anti-Macedonian sentiment grew in Athens. In 323 BCE, following Alexander's death, Aristotle was accused of impiety, a charge similar to that which led to Socrates' execution. To avoid a similar fate, Aristotle fled to Chalcis on the island of Euboea. He reportedly said, "I will not allow the Athenians to sin twice against philosophy." He died in 322 BCE, at the age of 62, from natural causes. Aristotle's influence on Western and Islamic philosophy is immense. In late antiquity and the Middle Ages, Christian, Jewish, and Islamic scholars preserved and expanded his works. Thomas Aquinas harmonized Aristotle's philosophy with Christianity. His logic dominated until the 19th century, and his ethics remain central today. Modern disciplines that owe their origin or structure to Aristotle include biology, logic, political science, literary criticism, ethics, metaphysics. Aristotle was not just a philosopher. He was a universal genius who sought to understand everything about the world and our place in it. He combined reason and observation, ethics and science, theory and practice. His teachings continue to resonate across centuries. From the way we conduct science to how we understand virtue and government, Aristotle's fingerprints are all around us. As Dante Alighieri called him in the Divine Comedy, the master of those who know. While philosophers pondered the nature of existence, playwrights told stories of gods and men on grand stages. Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides dramatized myths to explore justice, pride, and fate. In tragedies, heroes often fell not by monsters, but by their own choices. In comedies, like those of Aristophanes, the gods could be mocked, an early form of satire. Even amid intellectual progress, mythology remained sacred. The Oracle of Delphi, sacred to Apollo, continued to guide leaders. The Olympic Games, held in honor of Zeus, united warring states in temporary peace. While Athens pursued thought and beauty, Sparta worshipped strength and discipline. From age 7, Spartan boys trained to become warriors. Honor in battle was their highest virtue. Athens, the capital of modern Greece, is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, with a recorded history spanning over 3,400 years. In antiquity, Athens was a powerful city-state, polis, and is often referred to as the cradle of democracy and the birthplace of Western civilization. This ancient city was home to some of the most influential philosophers, artists, politicians, and thinkers of the ancient world, such as Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Pericles, and Sophocles. Athens is located in the region of Attica, in southeastern Greece. It is surrounded by mountains such as Mount Hymettus, Mount Pentelicus, and Mount Parnata, and is near the Aegean Sea. This location allowed it to become a center of trade, culture, and power in ancient times. The Acropolis, a large rocky hill that rises in the center of the city, became the heart of religious and political life in ancient Athens. Mycenaean period, circa 1600 to 1100 BCE. The earliest evidence of settlement in Athens dates back to the Neolithic period, but it became significant during the Mycenaean civilization. A palace complex existed on the Acropolis, and the city was ruled by kings, basileis. Dark Ages and Archaic period, c. 1100 to 500 BCE. Following the collapse of the Mycenaean civilization, Athens entered a period of decline known as the Greek Dark Ages. During the Archaic period, Athens began to grow economically and politically, adopting alphabetic writing and developing early forms of government. Athens is most famous for being the birthplace of democracy. However, this system evolved over time. Draco, 7th century BCE, introduced Athens' first written law code, harsh and unforgiving, hence the term draconian. Solon, 594 BCE, reformed laws and society. Abolished debt slavery. Divided citizens into 4 classes based on wealth. Created a council of 400. Cleisthenes, 508/507 BCE. Known as the father of Athenian democracy. Created the Council of 500. Reorganized tribes and introduced ostracism, banishment of dangerous citizens. Pericles, 5th century BCE. Led Athens during its golden age. Expanded democracy further, allowing even the lower classes to participate. Oversaw construction of the Parthenon and other grand public buildings. During the 5th century BCE, Athens became the cultural and intellectual center of the Greek world. Achievements. Philosophy, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Drama, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes. Art and architecture, the Parthenon, sculptures by Phidias, and pottery. History, Herodotus and Thucydides pioneered historical writing. Science and mathematics, Anaxagoras, Hippocrates, and others studied nature and medicine. Delian League. Formed after the Persian Wars to defend against Persia. Athens led the league and gradually transformed it into an Athenian empire. Used league funds to glorify Athens, causing tension with other Greek city-states. Persian Wars, 490 to 479 BCE. Athens played a major role in defeating the Persian Empire. Victories at Marathon, 490 BCE, and Salamis, 480 BCE, boosted Athenian prestige. Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BCE. A devastating conflict between Athens and Sparta. After nearly 30 years of war, Athens was defeated. Its democracy was briefly overthrown by the 30 tyrants, but later restored. 4th century BCE. Athens continued to be a center of learning and culture, despite declining political power. Was defeated by Philip II of Macedon at the Battle of Chaeronea, 338 BCE. Became part of the Macedonian Empire under Alexander the Great. Hellenistic period, 323 to 146 BCE. Athens remained a cultural and educational hub. Many Roman elites studied in Athens. Roman period, 146 BCE, 330 CE. Athens became part of the Roman Republic, later the Roman Empire. Emperors like Hadrian patronized Athens, building libraries and temples. The Agora and Acropolis were preserved and renovated. Major religious sites. The Parthenon, temple to Athena Parthenos. Erechtheion, sacred site with the olive tree of Athena. Temple of Hephaestus and Temple of Olympian Zeus. Festivals like the Panathenaea honored Athena with music, athletics, and sacrifice. Athens valued education, rhetoric, and debate. Boys were taught reading, writing, music, gymnastics, and philosophy. Schools like Plato's Academy and Aristotle's Lyceum attracted students from all over the Mediterranean. Athenian society emphasized freedom, participation, and excellence, arete. Democracy. Athens had a direct democracy, where citizens, free adult males, could vote in the assembly. Important institutions included the assembly, ecclesia. The Council of 500, bull. The people's courts, dicasteria. Women, slaves, and foreigners, metics, had no political rights but were part of Athenian life. Slavery and economy. Economy based on trade, silver mining, and agriculture. Slaves worked in households, workshops, and mines. Foreigners often handled commerce and craftwork. Legacy of ancient Athens. Athens' legacy is monumental in shaping modern society. A. Democracy. Inspired modern democratic governments and constitutions. The ideas of citizenship, public debate, and rule of law come from Athens. B. Philosophy and science. Socratic questioning, Aristotelian logic, and Platonic ideals laid the foundations of Western thought. C. Arts and literature. Athenian drama, architecture, sculpture, and historical writing are still studied and admired today. D. Education and critical thinking. The idea of education as a path to personal and civic improvement was born in Athens. Ancient Athens was not perfect, it excluded many from political life, waged wars, and owned slaves, but it achieved unparalleled heights in philosophy, politics, and the arts. Its intellectual and democratic ideals have echoed throughout history and continue to inspire the modern world. To study Athens is to understand the roots of Western civilization, and how a small city-state could leave a global legacy that endures over 2,500 years later. Sparta, also known as Lacedaemon, was one of the most powerful city-states in ancient Greece, famed for its militaristic society, disciplined citizens, and fearless warriors. Located in the southeastern Peloponnesus, Sparta's unique social and political system set it apart from other Greek polis like Athens. Where Athens focused on culture, philosophy, and democracy, Sparta became synonymous with strength, order, and military excellence. The Spartans produced some of history's most legendary fighters and lived by values such as honor, obedience, and sacrifice for the state. Sparta was located in Laconia, a fertile valley surrounded by mountains, Taygetus to the west and Parnon to the east. This isolation contributed to Sparta's inward-looking and self-sufficient culture. According to Greek mythology, Sparta was founded by Lacedaemon, a son of Zeus, who married Sparta, the daughter of King Eurotas. Their descendants were said to have ruled the region. Dorian invasion, circa 1100 BCE. The Spartans were descendants of the Dorians, a Greek-speaking people who migrated into the Peloponnese after the fall of the Mycenaean civilization. Around the 9th century BCE, Sparta began to rise as a dominant force in the region. Conquest of Messenia, 8th to 7th century BCE. Sparta's need for land and resources led to the Mycenaean Wars, through which they conquered the fertile region of Messenia and enslaved its population, turning them into helots, state-owned serfs who worked the land. Spartan society. Sparta was structured around its goal of maintaining a powerful military. Three main social classes. Spartiates, full citizens. Descendants of the original Dorian conquerors. Professional warriors who lived lives of discipline and training. Only they had political rights. Perioikoi, those who lived nearby. Free non-citizens who lived in surrounding villages. Engaged in trade, manufacturing, and farming. Could not vote or hold office but were essential to the economy. Helots, state-owned serfs. Enslaved population of Messenia and Laconia. Worked the land and served the needs of the Spartiate class. Often oppressed and subject to harsh treatment. The Spartan education system, the agoge. The agoge was the state-run military training program for boys. Key features. Started at age 7, boys were taken from their families and placed in communal barracks. Training included physical fitness, combat, survival skills, discipline, and loyalty to Sparta. Encouraged endurance, boys were deliberately underfed and encouraged to steal food, but punished if caught. At age 20, men entered full military service. At age 30, they became full citizens and could live with their families. The agoge emphasized obedience, strength, self-control, and bravery. Government and politics. Sparta had a mixed government system, combining monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy. Key political institutions. Dual kingship. Two hereditary kings ruled simultaneously, one from each of the two royal families, Agiad and Eurypontid. Responsible for leading the army and performing religious duties. Gerousia, Council of Elders. 28 elders over age 60, plus the 2 kings. Proposed laws and acted as a high court. Ephors, 5 elected magistrates. Elected annually. Had great power, including supervising the kings and controlling education. Apella, Assembly of Citizens. All male citizens over 30. Voted on laws and elected officials. This balance of power aimed to maintain stability and order, reducing internal conflict. Role of women in Sparta. Spartan women were remarkably different from their counterparts in other Greek city-states. Key features. Educated in reading, writing, athletics, and music. Encouraged to be physically fit to bear strong children. Could own property and inherit wealth. Managed households while men trained or fought. Famous for their outspokenness and independence. A well-known quote from a Spartan mother to her son. Come back with your shield, or on it. Military culture. The Spartan army was the most formidable in ancient Greece. Key aspects. The hoplite phalanx was the primary formation, tight-knit, shielded warriors with spears. Spartans trained relentlessly and fought without fear. They were taught that retreat was disgraceful. Discipline and coordination made them almost unbeatable on land. Famous conflicts. Battle of Thermopylae, 480 BCE. King Leonidas I led 300 Spartans and several thousand other Greeks in a heroic stand against the massive Persian army of Xerxes I. Though ultimately defeated, their sacrifice became legendary. Peloponnesian War, 431 to 404 BCE. Long and bitter war between Athens and Sparta. Sparta allied with Persia and eventually defeated Athens, establishing brief dominance over Greece. Decline of Sparta. After their victory in the Peloponnesian War, Sparta's power began to fade. Reasons for decline. Population of Spartiates declined drastically. Military rigidness made adapting to new tactics difficult. Defeated by Thebes at the Battle of Leuctra, 371 BCE, which ended Spartan dominance. Later became a minor power during the Hellenistic and Roman periods. By the time of Roman conquest, Sparta was more of a tourist attraction than a major player in politics or war. Spartan legacy. The legacy of the Spartans is vast and enduring. A. Military prowess. Sparta remains a symbol of discipline, loyalty, and courage. B. Minimalism and endurance. The word Spartan today describes a simple, austere lifestyle. Known for the laconic style, short, witty, and powerful speech. C. Role of women. Spartan women have been studied as early examples of strong female roles in male-dominated societies. D. Cultural contrast with Athens. The contrast between democratic, artistic Athens and militaristic, oligarchic Sparta provides insight into different paths a society can take. Famous sayings and anecdotes. Molon Labe, come and take them, Leonidas' defiant reply to Xerxes' demand for the Spartans to lay down their arms. A Spartan was asked, why is your sword so short? He replied, because we fight close to the enemy. A Spartan elder, Spartans do not ask how many are the enemy, only where they are. The Spartans built a society that prioritized unity, strength, and resilience. Though they lacked the artistic and intellectual richness of Athens, their discipline, valor, and uncompromising devotion to their way of life earned them a permanent place in history. Even today, the word Spartan evokes the image of the ultimate warrior, disciplined, brave, and unbreakable. The Macedonian Storm. In the 4th century BCE, the Greek world changed forever with the rise of Alexander the Great, son of Philip II of Macedon. Tutored by Aristotle, Alexander believed in the heroic ideals of Achilles, and saw himself as a man favored by the gods. He conquered Egypt, Persia, and parts of India, spreading Greek culture, and its myths, across continents. In his wake, cities like Alexandria became centers of knowledge, blending Greek and Eastern traditions. Though Alexander died young, his legacy sparked the Hellenistic Age, where Greek myth, language, and philosophy interwove with new empires. Decline and immortality. By 146 BCE, Greece fell under Roman rule. But the gods of Olympus were far from forgotten. The Romans adopted them, changing their names. Zeus became Jupiter, Aphrodite became Venus, and carried their stories across their vast empire. Even as temples crumbled and new religions rose, the myths endured, in manuscripts, sculptures, and whispered stories. In the Renaissance, Greek thought and myth found new life. In modern times, they shape books, films, and our very ideas of heroism and tragedy. The eternal flame. Ancient Greece may have faded from maps, but not from memory. It survives in our words, democracy, philosophy, theater, and in our imagination, where gods still hurl lightning, heroes still rise, and Olympus still glows golden above the clouds. To know the Greeks is to walk with both reason and wonder, through the corridors of history and the meadows of myth. Their greatest legacy. A world where humans dreamt like gods, and gods behaved like humans.